Hey guys, I'm back at it again, and yeah, I'm actually making another video. Hopefully, not a month between of the previous video, but I won't hold my breath since I usually have terrible luck with uploading shit. But nonetheless, we were actually continuing from Psychonauts 1 into Psychonauts 2. Much like the first game, I never really played it. I've only seen like one or two people review the game actually, and I kind of just formed this opinion of I will play it someday, and that someday was a month or two ago, or I think like a month. I can't. Time's kind of slipping away from me, but yeah, like a while ago, I made Psychonauts 1, and that's when I played it. Now, here I am playing Psychonauts 2 for the first time, might I add. Honestly, I have a lot of good stuff to say. But even though I only seen one or two people review the game, I have been waiting for this game to come out for honestly a couple years because I do remember back in probably like early 2015 or something around there where they actually announced the game and I saw it for the first time, not knowing what Psychonauts was before I went down the path of knowing what Psychonauts 1 is. Now, remember how I said that I saw this game a couple years ago? Well, this was actually during the time where they announced not the game, but the crowdfunding of the game, which is kind of just a weird thing to do overall. But luckily, it did succeed into raising enough funds for them to actually continue working on the game. Unfortunately, the money did run out, and much like Psychonauts 1, terrible luck they had with that game, they had to go around and looking for another publisher, but this time around, they had Xbox going back to them once again. And honestly, it was pretty surreal. Starting with the game, you can actually see an Xbox little intro screen, and just knowing the context behind Psychonauts 1, it's a little bit refreshing, and it kind of puts a little smile on your face knowing that even though it's been like 10 plus years, they did eventually make a Psychonauts game. That being, it's not Psychonauts 1, but Psychonauts 2, but hey, it's still a Psychonauts game. Following up where the story ended off in Psychonauts 1, we come to find out that we actually saved Zanato, Lily's father, the head honcho at Psychonauts, from the kidnapper who appears to be Dr. Lobato from the first game. We go inside his mind to try and figure out who hired him and why he actually did this in the first place. We end up learning nothing of the sort, but we do find out that there is a character named Meligula and she's somehow connected in all this, but we just don't know why. And right before we can figure anything else more, we end up at the Motherlode. The Motherlode is the secret area of the Psychonauts, pretty much their HQ. Upon landing here, we come face to face to the first brand new character of the game, Foresight, more of a mother to little kids like Raz and Lily, saying why they're technically official Psychonauts member deemed by Ford. So she actually undeems them since Ford was never an official member after being the whole shattering his mind type thing from the first game. And she actually ends up putting Raz in the intern program for all these students that end up trying to become Psychonauts. And we're pretty much just batch of brand new characters that replace the campers from the first game. We do end up following a lead where it leads us to a casino, but when Raz tries to get on a plane, Forsyth stops him and says that he's a little bit too young for this, a little bit too inexperienced. So Raz actually goes inside her mind and kind of rearranges a few things mentally. Upon doing this, she not only lets Raz go on the mission, but along with the rest of the students. We end up at the casino, and we do end up confirming that there is a character named Meligula who apparently appears to be dead, but they're trying to figure out a way to revive her. Upon hearing this information, we head back to the headquarters. Upon doing so, we do see Lily is a little bit in distress about her father still being unconscious from when we first rescued him. Upon going up to his body though, we actually see that he's only faking this because there is a mole in the Psychonauts who actually helped Dr. Lobato kidnap Zanato. Zanato gives Raz a very important secret mission, that being getting Ford Kreller along with the Psychonauts 6 back together in order to defeat Maligula. So Raz accepts his mission and tries to bring back Ford Kreller. Upon doing so, though, you might remember from the first game, he is a little bit kind of crazy because his whole shattering his mind type shit from the first game. We do the best thing and actually restore his brain. In the process, we do end up accidentally meeting some of the Psychonauts 6. And while we're inside Ford's mind, we come to find out that he has a few dark secrets of his own. We find out that Maligula was actually once the best friend of all of them, more so of a lover though to Ford, and that Maligula was never actually her real name. It was actually Linda, and Maligula is just more of a bad personality deemed by Ford. We also come to find out that Maligula isn't actually dead. She's actually been alive for this whole time. But the reason she's actually hasn't been doing anything is because Ford used a machine to mess up his mind and her mind, along with altering Maligula's mind and a certain father, that being Raz's dad. And you're wondering why he did this? This is actually because Maligula is related to Raz, that's his aunt. And so, being his aunt, he must have a grandma, which Maligula supposedly killed. When she did kill her, though, this was the perfect opportunity for Ford to mess up with Raz's dad's memory to make it to where that was never their aunt, but that was actually the grandma. So that's why they call Maligula the grandma. Ford being back to 100% mental compatibility, Ford coming back to his original self, he tells Raz that there is still some good in her and that the only bad part is Maligula, which they actually decide to use a machine on her to try to get rid of that bad side of her once and for all. So they bring her back to where it all started and use a machine that Ford once used all those years ago, but Raz has to do a little bit of tuning up. After tuning up a little bit, they get it working and they go inside Maligula's head. But right before going face to face, or I guess I could say mind to mind, Lily's dad, Zanato, brings us back from the mental world back to the real world. Upon doing this though, Lily tells us that her father's been acting a little bit weird. That after he got up from being unconscious, he's been a little bit off. So we take a look inside Zanato's head. We find out that Zanato isn't actually Zanato, it's someone else's mind inside of Zanato's head. We come to find out that it is actually the heir of the land that Raz's father, including Maligula herself, were from. So this is obviously the mole that everyone was talking about inside the HQ. So we take a little bit of looking around inside the heir's mind. We find out that the whole reason Maligula is actually pretty much Maligula is because of the heir's father. The heir's father pretty much took control of her mentally and pretty much made her believe that killing protesters in the country would solve everything. Upon doing this though, she kills Raz's father, that being Maligula's sister. We get kicked out of the brain, and once we do, Maligula is finally reawakened. Upon this, Lily actually goes off on her own to try to find her real dad, and we try to gain some distance away from Maligula. Upon doing so, we meet up with Raz's rest of the family, and they kind of help us re-enter Maligula's mind, introducing the final showdown. We do a little bit of copy paste from the first game where we get a family member of Raz's, give him all the psychological energy, and we make him into a giant to do a little giant final showdown type of thing. Upon doing so, we defeat Maligula, saving Raz's real fake grandma. Yeah, they just kind of accept it at that point. So we jump out from mine. We find out that Lily found her real dad and has to put his real brain in the real body. We get a little bit of a speech from Foresight. She tells us that we graduated the intern program and we made it to the junior Psychonauts. And then credits roll. And that's really about it for story wise. Honestly, a pretty interesting ride. I like the twist and turn they did there with Maligula. It was a little bit predictable at some cases, but hey, I still liked it. They do a thing where a lot of games did back in the day where they strip you of all your abilities and moves that you learned from the previous game just for you to relearn them in very specific spots in the game, which is a little bit weird and dumb. But thankfully, it's nothing that lasts too long in the game, just pretty much the first mission of the game. Raz has all the moves from the first game, minus some of the psychological abilities he had in the first game, that being the shield power up, the confusion bomb, and invisibility, which I'm not really too sad about overall because I never really used any of those abilities and they were very specific in the game that they didn't really do much with them besides one or two sections of the whole. Although Raz does acquire one new move, it's not a psychological move, but it's a wall jumping mechanic, which is honestly very reminiscent of Mario 64 if I had to compare it to anything. Now, there being a wall jump in the game doesn't really make it seem as a more important or out there detail of the game, but it really is because, like Mario 64, they really let you go crazy with the wall jumping, sequence breaking here and there if you're good enough. Also makes you think why there wasn't a wall jumping mechanic in the first game overall. They also do revamp some of the psychological powers you had in the first game, that being pyrokinesis, having this little just farther enough, like 2 feet away from you, targeting system. Later upgrading it to being a AoE attack. Telekinesis, where it's pretty much a third person shooter camera angle, which is a lot better from the first game, that being just you can only throw it so far until you have to pick it up and reset your aiming. Now going on to the more new abilities that you do acquire in the game, those being mental connection, which is just connecting two thoughts, giving you this hook shot like travel, the ability to slow down certain objects, including enemies, for a certain amount of time, making a clone of yourself to squeeze through small or tight areas, that way they can let you go on by. We still do have psychic rankings and all that jazz, but they do introduce two new collectibles, that being the key, which you can unlock a certain chest around the area, unlocking you just more money or titanium, and the other one being mental wisdom nugget, which you can only find in mental worlds, replacing the whole mental cobweb since I guess they just didn't like that idea. They also revamped the camera, which much like the first game, my biggest complaint of that was the platforming, because half the time you just didn't know where you were jumping, how far to jump, or how short of a jump you had, and you just ended up falling off the ledge like a dumbass, or at least I did. In this game though, they completely fixed it. Like I said, they revamped it to where you can just move it freely as much as you want, and in doing so, they kind of have this really good combo of the levitation ball, double jump, wall jump, and a new dive move, which I did forget to include, but you do learn it a little bit later in the game, which just makes the platforming just way more fun and overall easier. I don't know if they intended for some of the stuff that I did in the game to be done this way, but with that good combo I just said, I kind of ended up breaking certain part of the game. The other problem I had with the first game was its combat. It felt very dry and just not really that inclusive, just leaving you to either shoot them, run past them, and that's it. They felt more like obstacles rather than enemies. In this game though, much like everything else, they revamped it to where it's a lot more fluid. You're not only just shooting them, you're running around, zipping everywhere, because if you stand in one place, you're going to get overwhelmed, keeping you on your toes. And remember how I said in the last game, it felt like the enemies never really include your other mental powers? In this game, they actually have new enemies which include using your new powers to actually defeat them, which is just another layer of the combat, which I really do love because it's a lot more complex than the first game. Because every time there's an enemy, it feels like they're an enemy and not truly just an obstacle where I just shoot at them or run past them. It feels like an enemy I have to stop and take down. And if you don't like a certain power working, they also introduce a batch system where it not only just alters your power and what it does to the environment and enemies, it just outright changes what they do to them. And like I said earlier, and that being this is a Psychonauts game, there's a lot more minds to delve into, a lot of them being diverse and just outright unique places. Also incorporating the whole art style from the first game, they do that a lot more so in this one. That being, not every world has its own art style, and that why outright changing how Raz and certain things look, but they just have their own unique style to each and every one of them. And none of them really bear repeating any of the minds you delve into the first game and this game, which is honestly just a huge accomplishment I just can't talk about enough. Because you even have games like Mario, Kirby, etc., have a problem of pretty much just repeating themes and not doing anything truly unique to them. You can also tell from the gameplay and just outright cutscenes that this is truly not a current gen but a last gen, that being PS4 and Xbox One, I think is what the last gen was called. Sorry. It's just Xbox always had a very dumb way of naming their shit that I can never really remember which one's which. But whatever the last PS4 rival thing was, okay? They truly went crazy with the visuals, the animation, and just like, look at this. This is honestly amazing. And you're telling me this is running on a PS4? Yes, I'm playing on the PS5, but it just boggles my mind. Like, this feels like an animated movie, much less a video game I'm playing. Hell, sometimes I often forget that I'm actually playing this rather than just watching it. Going back a little bit, I did mention the students which replace the campers. That being, they're interesting characters, but I just feel like the game just outright forgets that they even exist sometimes. Because they just pop up in random sections of the game. Hell, they don't even pop up in the story after the casino mission. Well, they do pop up like one time, but it's in the final fight, and it's very random why they're actually there. So they pretty much redo the problem, except in better quality, I guess you could say. Which is a little bit of a downer because these characters actually do have a personality, it seems, but they just don't delve into that. Which, hopefully, if there is a next game, they probably actually go inside the mind of these characters to just develop them even more. They also introduce side missions, which, like the name states, they're side missions. And for me personally, what I view as a side mission is something that doesn't say it's mandatory or necessary. It's just something you do on the side where it can either develop the main character, a side character, or even a story. Not so much to where it's mandatory, but enough to where you made it feel like it was special for you to go out of your way to do this. Although in this game, there's more of a to-do thing than anything else, which is a little bit sad, but there's only like 3 of them anyway, so I mean, really, what was the point? Going back to the main story, one thing I just didn't outright like is you're repeatedly told that Maligula is evil and she got turned this way because of this, but they just keep on telling you, not outright show you. You even go inside her mind to poke around, and yet you don't see any of this unfold in a point of view type angle. It just keeps on being told by you, and I just feel like they could have really dug deep into this by a point of view angle, whether that's actually you exploring her mind and you're going into this Maligula part of it, or just by having a cutscene where you are Maligula seeing the events unfold by your very eyes. The music in this game, unlike the first one, it just fit the environments that they're in, but I just actually outright listen to most of these. Hell, I just absolutely love the Psy Kings area music. I mean, I don't like the actual song, but there's a certain part where you run on a rainbow bridge, and I just couldn't help but keep on repeatedly going over it because the little sound it makes just outright made my ears go mushy. That was a weird thing that I said, but whatever, you kind of get the picture. Overall, this game is truly what I imagine a sequel being. Bigger, better, trimming the fat that the first one might have had, outright just excluding it all. And this game does that. The combat, the platforming, the characters, the story, the music, just everything. I really do think they just went up and beyond with this. and I truly love this one more so than the first one. I mean, I even got the platinum trophy for it that I never do for any particular game unless I truly love it. Hell, honestly, I might even tell you to start with this game than this first game, but that's just me. I still would recommend playing the first one because you might find some more enjoyment than I found in it myself. But if you didn't like that one, trust me, the second game will absolutely pull you in. If it doesn't, then honestly, I'm a bit surprised. I mean, I wonder why you just didn't like it. But hey, that's just my opinion. And with that, have a good morning, good night. If it's your birthday, happy birthday, and have a peaceful day. Next time, though, it's going to be a game not including Psychonauts, but it is going to be following a platformer based type of game. And hopefully, I'll actually get it working and there's be no problems, but don't hold your breath.